hoping to. If you feel at any time that you would like us to pause this recording so that you can communicate or we can have any part of this discussion without the recording, please ask us. We're happy to hit pause. You are welcome and encouraged to have your camera on or off, whatever ways best support your engagement today. My has muted everyone when we came in to the digital space. If you would like to verbalize at any time and communicate with us, you are welcome to unmute, or you're also welcome to use the Zoom raise your hand feature, which is down under the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we can call on you. We have the real-time captioning set up and the ASL interpreters pinned, and we're thankful for those supports. If you are not seeing or accessing those access measures, let us know.
I can access it. The brain damage I have in my head won't allow me to connect the dots to remember how to get the presentation up, and I don't want to have to monitor 3 screens to do this.
I understand and appreciate that. I'm wondering if are you able to visually access the screen, the Zoom screen right now?
Yes.
Do you see words on the screen that say accessibility check?
Got it.
Then we've got your access. Then that's what we're wanting to make sure you have access to.
Cool. Good to go.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
If at any point in our discussion this evening you need tech or access support, you're welcome to verbalize as Brian just did, or you're also welcome to send a chat message. We're going to try to take a short break about halfway through our evening as an access measure as well. Is there anything else we need to get sorted or clarified before Mai goes into our discussion this evening? We're really glad you're all here with us. This is Angela speaking. Mai, I believe you're muted.
Thanks, Angela. If I change up my screen here, is it going to continue in presentation mode? Because I really don't like seeing it like this.
This is Angela speaking. Mai, what are you wanting to see differently?
I'm just gonna stop sharing real quick. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So before I go on, I want to do some quick introductions, if that's okay. I haven't even had a moment to really look at how many of us are here in the virtual space this evening, but there's a lot of us. So we're not gonna introduce ourselves just for the sake of time tonight, but I do want to call out a couple folks who I've been working with to make this evening possible. One person you've already met, which is Angela. She's been doing great at supporting this work, and tonight as far as logistics and getting the agenda together. But then I also want to call out Claudia Fuentes, who is also one of our co-hosts. Claudia will be monitoring the chat and doing all sorts of other wonderful things, including taking notes. So just wanted to point out the other 2 co-hosts for our evening tonight. So with that, I will go back to sharing my screen. Does that look good to y'all? Great. Okay, So I guess you're all wondering why we're here, right? Obviously, we're talking about disability justice tonight, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about how all of this started and a little bit of just some background for you. And so why are we here? We are here because disability justice is something that I'm doing as a Bush Fellow. Some of you I know, some of you I don't know, but those of you who do know me may remember that I am a Bush Fellow. I'm a 2021 Bush Fellow, and in addition to the leadership development, that is the ultimate goal of being a Bush Fellow. There's also the transformative change that Bush wants all of their fellows to work on, which, you know, ultimately is like a positive impact for our community. And so that's where disability justice comes in. And so obviously that's a big, you know, a big mountain to climb. And for some of us, we'll be climbing a little slower than others, but that's okay because not everybody is coming from the same space, right? And we're welcoming all folks tonight because we're all allies in this and we're all doing this collaboratively. And the very fact that you're joining us tonight shows that you have interest in either continuing work that you may have already started with disability justice, or you want to learn more because you don't know a lot and maybe you want to contribute in one way or another. So one of the things that lots of folks have been doing as they help support this work that I'm doing as a Bush Fellow is meeting with me a lot and providing guidance and advice and, you know, all other sorts of support. And Angela and Claudia have definitely been a part of that process. And we talked a lot about, like, what does disability justice look like for Minnesota, right? And, you know, we had a lot of conversations about this individually and collectively, and we came up with this, I guess you could call it a goal. We can call it whatever we want, you know, as long as we, you know, kind of work on it together. But initially what we decided was to develop a community-informed action plan to implement the principles of disability justice in Minnesota. And well, you know, Angela's going to talk a little bit more about the principle of disability justice. I know many of you all are already familiar. Some of you may not be familiar at all, but there's the phrase community informed in here, which I want to highlight and point out because that's really, really important going forward as we try to build up disability justice in Minnesota. It's something that is something I want to be very intentional in, right? Because disability justice is about community. You know, community is such a huge part of how it happens. So that's, you know, where we're starting from, and hopefully we can build a community around developing a framework or movement or whatever it might look like, right? So
This is Angela speaking. Sorry to interrupt you, I'm
Yep.
seeing that Brian has their hand raised. I'm wanting to check in with Brian and see if there's something that he needs.
Yeah, I just had two quick questions. First is, if I'm understanding this correctly, Maya, you're a fellow. You're doing a fellowship, and you're doing a Bush Fellowship. And as one of the criteria for the Bush Fellowship, you are hosting this. Is that my understanding? As part of your fellowship, you're hosting this this get together. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is thanks for that question, Brian. That's so I'm doing this work on disability justice as part of my fellowship work. And so the part of my fellowship work that is something that all Bush Fellows are doing is transformative change in their communities to create positive impact, right? And so I've chosen disability justice as that transformative change that I want to see in the community. And I'll explain a little bit more as we continue to meet this evening on how that came to be and why I felt that was important. But disability justice was a part of my own work plan that I put together as a Bush Fellow, if that makes sense.
Yes, yep. Thank you for your honesty. And then my second question is does anybody here know, other than you, Maya, does anybody here know how many times this topic of discussion has been repeated year after year? I want to know. I want a confirmation on whether or not this has been repeated year after year. I just want the confirmation whether this has been repeated. That this topic, this discussion, if this has been repeated in the past, I just want a confirmation whether it has or not. From somebody.
This is Angela speaking. Brian, if I'm understanding your question correctly, this is the first time that MI has gotten folks together from Minnesota to have this conversation in particular.
I don't mean Maya. I mean anybody.
Anybody.
I don't mean Maya at all. I mean anybody who's picked up this baton in the years before. I just want to know. Just want a confirmation, a simple confirmation on whether someone has previously picked up this baton. I just want a yes or no. That's all.
Yes, I would say yes. Folks have been having this conversation for a lot of years, and Mai's trying to have it here in Minnesota in a different way.
Beautiful. That's all I want to know.
Thanks for asking, Brian.
This is Jeff. Can I ask a question or make a comment? This is Jeff. I just want to comment.
This is Mai. Go ahead, Jeff.
To my knowledge, Brian, it's my understanding that this is the first time in an organized capacity that I've seen this brought out in a forum that has reached out to the community in general to ask about getting together to talk about disability justice in a collective way. We've heard, in my opinion, in my knowledge and dealing and working with the disability community for many years, this is the first time that we've come out as a collective to address disability justice in the state of Minnesota and principles of disability justice in Minnesota. Thank you.
This is Angela speaking. Thank you, Jeff, for that history. I want to name that there have been activists and organizers in Minnesota for a long time, particularly a group called ADAPT that used to meet and used to do a lot of work like this, but I think not quite in the same way that Maya is hoping we can talk about it today. So I do want to acknowledge that there have been folks, but just maybe differently than what Maya is wanting to do. And I see Heidi, you have your hand up.
Yeah, my question is this similar to what you brought to the self-advocacy group through the ARC, Maya?
Yeah, Heidi, this is absolutely, you're right. You're right on the nose. We've been talking about this with the ARC self-advocates. So hopefully this will be review for you, Heidi.
Yeah, so tonight it will be more polish up or I'll learn something new. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
This is Angela speaking. I see in the chat that Muzamil has asked, is the Q&A session now or at the end of the presentation? I believe Maya and I planned mostly at the end, but we welcome questions throughout if clarity is needed. Maya, does that sound right?
Yep.
Are you ready to go on to the next slide then, Maya?
I am. Thanks for all those questions, folks. So let's go on. So what is disability justice? I guess that's a big question, an important question. We're not going to spend too much time tonight because we are trying to keep this more of an overview. there will be opportunities to continue conversations, ask more questions, and be involved in other ways. And we'll tell you about those opportunities a little bit later, after we have our 5-minute break, which is coming up in a little bit here. But for now, what I want to say about disability justice is I want to make a really important distinction, so that we're all sort of on the right page, or not the right page, but on the same page, as far as like framing up what this work will entail. And that's going to involve just a distinction between what disability justice is versus what disability rights is. And so, you know, again, I want to make this a high level overview. There is definitely, you know, lots of conversation to be had about this subject matter. But what I want to point out now is that disability justice is not the same as disability rights. The way that disability justice works is probably, I would say, it's coming from a very different perspective from what most folks are familiar with as disability rights. So when you're talking about disability rights, you can see on the screen here, this slide is titled Disability Justice versus Disability Rights. And on the left side, I have a column called Disability Rights. And under that, I have that disability rights has historically and culturally centered white experiences, white supremacy, single disability issues, single issues, right? And it's more or less a legal framework. And then on the other side of this slide, you'll see disability justice. And underneath that, I have that disability justice centers intersectionality. It centers wholeness. It centers essential body minds, essential disabled body minds, right? And it also is about oppression in the form of ableism. And we can talk about these if you want, but what I want to really highlight here is that disability rights obviously is a wonderful thing. It's a positive thing for folks with disabilities, right? It's helped make our lives better in the sense that it's given us a sense of, you know, inclusion, and, you know, it's helped us to be able to, you know, be treated more fairly and equally in different areas, you know, whether that's in employment or, you know, just sort of living out our daily lives, right? Getting from place to place and being a part of our communities. That's great. You know, I'm not downplaying that whatsoever, but disability justice takes disability rights to a different level, and it talks about the underlying systemic oppressions that have existed and has really, you know, impacted folks with disabilities and prevented us from being able to be included and welcomed in our communities the same way folks without disabilities have been. And disability rights doesn't really address those oppressions or that ableism. I often call, you know, the oppression of disabled folks as ableism. And, you know, we'll learn more about that as we continue to do this work. But I hope that I have been able to make that distinguishment between disability justice and disability rights, you know, somewhat clear. But if you have questions about that, I'll take those. And I can't see the chat. Well, maybe I can if I do this. Okay.
This is Angela speaking. I can watch the chat for you as well, so I can help you with that.
Thank you. So that's something that up front, I just want to mention. We're not, this effort around disability justice and dreaming up what it could look like for disabled folks in Minnesota is not disability rights work. Disability rights work has been happening for a long, long time. I know lots of folks in the virtual room this evening has done work on disability rights and, you know, have done amazing work. But that is not what we're doing here, and that's not the framework that we're going to be working with. We're going to be looking at, you know, disabled folks who identify as multiple things. You know, we know that disability is not a monolith, right? And we all have many identities, and we want to look at disability as an identity and how, you know, we've been impacted by ableism, so that maybe that can help shape disability rights too, right? But it can also help shape lots of other things, including, you know, the medical industrial complex, the prison industrial complex, all of those things that we as disabled folks have been a part of for generations and generations, but have always been victims of oppression. So with that said, I'm going to move on. And I'm actually going to stop talking because Angela is going to talk about the 10 principles of disability justice. And so I will hand it off to her.
Yeah, thanks, Mai. This is Angela speaking. Margot, I see a question you've asked in the chat. Do you have a definition for essential body minds? The way that I would describe that and define that, and Mai, please jump in if I get it wrong, is thinking about the importance of our body and mind as it is and how it impacts our life, and as nothing wrong with our body mind. Like we may have disabilities, but there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing that needs to be fixed or corrected, that we are whole just as we are. Mai, would you add anything to that?
This is mine. No, I think that's right, Angela. I would also say that, excuse me, as I've been reading up on disability justice, and you know, this goes back to your comment, Brian, earlier about like who has done this work before. You know, one of the founders of disability justice is an individual named Eli Clare, and Eli was actually the person who coined the phrase body minds. And it's exactly as Angela just said, it's really about, you know, the fact that, yes, maybe some of our bodies are not, you know, quote unquote, abled as some others are, right? But that our, you know, our minds and our bodies are inextricably connected, right? And that no matter what our ability level, we're still essential and valued, you know, individuals. So, okay, I'll stop talking. Thanks.
This is Angela speaking again. We're hoping to take a break in a few minutes so that folks who may need to take care of themselves in any way can do that in our meeting this evening. Before we do, Mai's asked me to say a few words on the 10 principles of disability justice. And Mai and I both hope that we can get together as a group and talk about these 10 principles one at a time and in much more detail in the future. So what I'm going to say now is just an overview. The 10 principles of disability justice were really kind of like a plan or a pathway, a framework for thinking about making change in society that some really amazing disability activists came up with about 25 years ago, actually. And those folks were Black and Indigenous and people of color. They were poor white folks. They were queer and trans, GLBTQ folks. And they all came together and said, you know, we feel left out of the disability activist movement, as Mai was explaining. So how can we pull together a way to move forward that won't leave anybody out? And these are the 10 kind of ways they thought through. The first is intersectionality. And that's a really big word to say that we all have a lot of identities that influence how we move through the world. And you can't separate those identities. I am a white person and I'm a disabled person and I'm a queer person. And those things all come together. Those all intersect to make me who I am. And when someone asks me to only think about my disability, but not about being GLBTQ, they're asking me to leave out part of myself, and that's not okay. So that's the first principle, intersectionality. The second principle is leadership of the most impacted. And that's the idea that those of us who have experienced inequality and oppression know the most about how to change the system and our culture to be more fair, more equitable, less oppressive. So we need to listen to those of us and to those people who have those experiences, because we can learn from those folks and from one another. The third principle is anti-capitalism. That's an idea that we want to challenge the way that mainstream US culture determines our worth as individuals based on how much we can work, on what we can do, or what we can provide, or how many hours we can work, or if we can work. And that's an oppressive idea, because disability justice says we are valuable regardless of how much we can work or if we can work. The fourth principle is cross-movement solidarity, which means that as disabled people, we want to support other social movements toward change. So we want to think about how reproductive justice today, in particular, is a disability justice issue too. We want to think about how housing is a disability justice issue, how racism and police violence is a disability justice issue. And we want to support other movements that are trying to make change and ask them to support our movement too. The fifth principle is wholeness. And that's what we were just talking about with the term body mind. It's the idea that we're whole people exactly as we are, even if we have brain injuries, even if we're wheelchair users, even if we have mental health conditions, we're still whole people. The sixth principle is sustainability. And that's the idea that we want to do this work in a very deliberate and intentional way. We don't want to rush, because we want to make sure that we include everyone and we make change that's going to last. So we want to make sure that we do the work in a way that makes it stay and that allows us to do the work even when it's hard. The seventh principle is cross-disability solidarity. And that's the idea that as we all may have experiences, sometimes there's disconnect or disagreement among and across disabilities. So we want to think about how people who are blind or low vision can support people with mental illness, and people with mental illness can support wheelchair users, and wheelchair users can support intellectually disabled people, and how we can all support each other and come to learn and understand each other across our disability differences so we can understand our similarities and how to fight for change. The eighth principle is interdependence. And that's the idea that nobody does anything alone or by ourselves. And that the idea of being independent people is an oppressive idea, that we're actually deeply connected. And it's by understanding our connections that we can work to make change. The ninth principle, collective access, means that we all work together to ensure that everyone has as much access as they need to engage in whatever way they need to engage. For instance, Linda has named in the chat that she has seen many of these pieces before, and that she's gonna have her camera off but listening, which is perfectly fine. That's what Melinda needs, and we can support that. And the 10th and last principle is collective liberation, which is the idea that we all become more liberated when we work collectively to make change across our differences in society. And I'll turn it back over to Mai now. Are you there, Mai?
I'm here. Sorry, I was using the wrong mouse. So nothing was happening. Yeah, this is my thank you, Angela, for that overview of the 10 principles of disability justice. And I appreciate you providing that your guidance on that. And so that's the backbone of disability justice, right? And we'll be going into those principles much more deeply as we continue to meet going forward here. And again, like I said, we'll talk about those opportunities in a little bit. But for now, if there are no burning questions before we take a break, we're gonna go ahead and do that and give you all 5 minutes to do whatever you need to do and come back in 5 minutes. And so that'll be at 7:01, right? Am I doing that right? Okay. So everybody take a 5-minute break and we'll see you back here in just a little bit. Thank you. Alrighty, this is Mai again. I hope you enjoyed your short break there. I'm gonna call everyone back and we'll resume. So just want to make sure I've got the right thing here. All right, I will continue sharing my screen and we'll just pick up where we left off, okay? All right, hopefully you all can see that. If not, stop me and I'll do something. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. I guess I could do this in presenter mode, right? So we talked about the 10 principles of disability justice. And so now the question is, what could disability justice look like in Minnesota? And I think this is really where that community informed phrase comes in, right? When we talked about what our overall goal is going to be with this work. And if you recall, community informed was in that statement. And so, you know, this could look like anything. And I think when people who are not as familiar with disability justice hear disability justice, they might be a little intimidated or just not real clear on like what that entails, you know. And I've heard folks tell me, well, I'm not going out and like marching in the streets, you know, that, you know, for some people that's just not feasible, right? But that's not just the only thing that you do when you're doing disability justice work. And I'll give you an example of what I'm doing. As a Bush Fellow, I've been working on some systems change stuff. So really trying to infuse disability justice into, you know, all the different systems that we have in Minnesota. And, you know, I think it's time for us as a community to really acknowledge the fact that we don't have the luxury anymore to just sit by and like not take some real action on disability stuff, especially because of where we're at right in history right now. And you know what I always try to say is that justice is not truly achieved unless folks with disabilities are included in that work. And so my systems change work has involved, you know, working with the public sector, especially state government, trying to really look at, you know, where does ableism exist in state government, whether that's in its hiring practices or, you know, how different state agencies, you know, build in, you know, inclusive and welcoming policies and, you know, other infrastructure to, you know, support folks with disabilities as they're involved in decision-making in state government. So that's one thing that I'm working on. The other thing that I hope to share as we continue this work is the audit tool that was just created by a disability justice leader and, you know, founder amongst the circle of founders that started the work. Leah Lakshmi, I can't remember the last parts of her name because she's got a very long name, but Leah put out a audit tool that she worked on with Stacy Milburn, the late Stacy Milburn. And that audit tool actually is very similar to how I am sort of envisioning this work for Minnesota. And that really, like, you know, helps bring up really good questions to, you know, ask and evaluate and use to evaluate the work of disability justice. And I think it's very applicable here in Minnesota. But it could be anything, and here I think is where we want to hear from you all, what do you think, aside from those big words and phrases that I just use involving systems change and a toolkit and all that sort of stuff. What do you want to see happen with disability justice in Minnesota? And I want you to just really think big, and Bush is always telling fellows this too. They're always like, this is your opportunity to dream big. If there were no obstacles in the way here, if there were no, resources as far, or barriers as far as resources or capacity, what would it look like, right? And I think it's time to stop being Minnesota nice about disability. We've been doing that for so long that we need to just be real with ourselves, right? We're ableist and we should just own up to that, right? But how could it look like? How could disability justice look like here? I would love disability justice to be incorporated into all the social justice work in Minnesota. And that includes racial justice, gender justice, environmental justice, all of that, because disability is always left out, right? And I know that I'm preaching to the choir here probably, but it's time. Now is the time to really start thinking about those things, and not, all the variables aside, what could it look like to you and your family and your kids, your coworkers, your neighbors, right? I always like to use the example of when I first used light rail for the very first time in my life in Minneapolis with the whatever line that is, blue line, right? There were no barriers getting into that train, right? And it was really nice. And I was like, whoa, this is so great, because as somebody who has used transit all over the country, I know that sometimes there are some barriers, right? Even when they're promoted as accessible. But when you can use something on an equal level as everybody else, it's an amazing feeling, right? I wish I had that feeling every single day of my life. And that's what I want you to think about when you're dreaming disability justice. What does that look like? What does that feel like? Not just for you, but for the people you care about and for your community. And it starts with us, right? It starts with us. It starts with the folks in this virtual room tonight. And because we're the folks who are going to co-create this thing, and we can start right here, with us. So who are we, and do we know each other? Do we even have community? What do we need as disabled Minnesotans that disability justice could offer? Because it looks different in Minnesota than it does in California, right? Which is where disability justice started, with all of those founding leaders that Angela and I have been talking about during this meeting tonight. We're a Midwest state and we have our own needs. So as we continue this work together and as we continue to talk, I want us to think about those things, right? And if you're from greater Minnesota, what are your needs as disabled folks versus metro area disabled Minnesotans, right? And I would love, in my crip utopia, we all get along and we all know each other, and we all have a sense of community. And I would love for this effort around disability justice to bring us together in that way. But we will get the opportunity to know each other better as we do this work, because interdependence was one of those 10 principles, right, that Angela talked about. And that's really a part of interdependence, is knowing that everything that we do impacts each other. It just doesn't start and end with us, right? So I'm not looking at the chat, but if there are great things happening there, either Claudia or Angela, feel free to point them out to me. I would love to hear what other people are thinking about.
Hello, well, this is Claudia, and Poppy agreed that we need to be direct and honest. Thanks, Poppy. There was an interest in the audit tool. And we have a comment by Anne Jankilla. I apologize if I am mispronouncing Anne's name. I can read what she posted in the chat. She said she works at Minnesota DHS Deaf and Hard of Hearing. DHS, I presume, refers to the Department of Human Services. And she serves the Arrowhead region and is a member of the Iron Range Equal Justice Committee. Each judicial district in Minnesota has an equal justice. Let's see here, Equal Justice Committee supported by the statewide Committee for Equality and Justice. Here's a link to the Committee for Equality and Justice where you can see the goals and work they're doing. I'm going to read exactly what it says. I encourage everyone to get in touch with their own district's Equality and Justice Committee to highlight disability justice and partner with them as much as possible. Exclamation point. Thank you, Anne.
This is my thank you.
And this is Claudia. That's the last chat I've seen.
Great. Thank you. So this is my again. I'm gonna just keep going forward, and we'll check back in the chat periodically. So thank you for those comments. And Heidi, do you have your hand raised? Do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I would like human services, you know, when we do this work, to be more in line, no matter where I go in the state of Minnesota. I know that's hard, you know, because every disability, you know, when you're signed to disability help, does it a little bit different, but they have to follow some rules of the state. But it's not, you know, there's a lot more work we can do. So that's where my power will be in helping the justice to go forward. Because I think we should have a bigger voice in saying enough is enough for basic things not working. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. This is my again. And yes, I appreciate that. I'm gonna keep going forward. So what?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. This is Angela speaking. Poppy has their hand up. I want to make sure we get to Poppy's point.
Okay. Hi, Poppy.
Hi, this is Poppy speaking. I just wanted to say my big dream within working with disability justice, I would like to see more disabled people in Congress. Because obviously we are the ones who are impacted by many things. My other big dream is I would love for the percentage of inequity with many diverse people within the disability community, for that percentage to be a lot smaller. I would love for it to be 5% or less. My other big dream is that there would be less hoop jumping to get your access needs. I would love for it to be as an individual who doesn't, for various reasons, which I'll make it short, for various reasons, I don't qualify for certain waivers or things like that. And when you don't, it's very difficult, at least in my experience, and I'm still figuring out how to navigate and try to get my needs met. But if you don't have qualification for a waiver or certain certificates of basically what I call disability acknowledgement, that for whatever reason, this is the category that you fit in to get certain needs met. But if you don't fit into that category because it's not applicable to you to get those waivers, then the services are basically, from my experience, none. Or it's very difficult to get them. So I would like to see that change. And I'm not saying that those programs are terrible or that it's bad. It's just there are other individuals where that particular circumstance to get those waivers or certificates or documentation qualification essentially cannot be applicable for whatever reason. And I just in general would like our access needs to be just easier to receive, less having to set up everything, go through 6 to 8 loops, and then get sent back to the same person. And then they're like, oh, well, you need to talk to, well, I was sent to them and now I'm sent back to you. So that is my big dream in helping with this work. And I'm super excited. I'm literally on the verge of tears because I'm so excited from what everyone is encouraged on within the chat, and I'm just really looking forward to being a part of this.
Thank you, Poppy. I appreciate your enthusiasm. I'm really excited too. Thank you. This is Mai again, and so thanks for those comments. So let's talk about what your role can be in this work to make disability justice happen in Minnesota. You're obviously all here because you have some sort of interest, I hope, or maybe you just really wanted to be a part of a space where you might have same interests around disability work. Well, we're continuing these conversations. We're going to be doing them, we're not sure yet, either monthly or every other month for at least the next coming year, because I will continue to be a fellow until August of 2023. And that means that I will have money to keep doing these monthly meetings until then. So you can be a part of that. That would be wonderful. And obviously I will continue to communicate with folks on how what the next steps are for that once we sort of get those plans solidified. We're also planning a Minnesota Disability Justice Summit for next summer, for summer of 2023. And I don't have details at this current time, but that's what some of you all are for, who are interested in this work. We're gonna make that ask that some of you all who wanna be, a part of this to also help plan a summit. And again, I don't know what that's gonna look like. All I know is that it's gotta happen within the next year. So, what I'm envisioning, of course, this is a collective effort again, right? But what I was envisioning was sort of a hybrid of a working summit, but also a summit where we can come together and just, be our, authentic selves and be in a space where we feel safe enough to really just be disabled folks, talking and planning out what disability justice could really look like, right, for Minnesota in a sustainable way. Again, going back to the sustainability principle So yeah, we're planning that. Would love all of y'all to be a part of that too. So what do we need from you? What's the big ask here? And sorry, the formatting here is kind of off. But so this slide is titled, "What do we need from you?" There are 3 options here. Option 1, help lead and plan. Option 2, come to regular meetings and continue to help us dream. And then finally, option 3, stay connected and come to the summit next year. So those are the 3 asks. We would love for you to choose at least one, and more than one, it would be great. But you know, we can't do this without you. And you are going to help lead this. So I hope that you know, most of you, if not all of you, are able to continue being a part of this work. I would also add here, though, think about folks who are missing from tonight's meeting, and reach out to them and have them join us next time we convene. Who's missing here, right? Who's missing, and who can you share this information with, and invite them. So that's the other ask that I would have for you all. Okay, I think I skipped over you, Angela. I apologize for that. I was just.
No, this is Angel speaking. That's totally fine, Mai. We're doing it together.
Okay.
I just want to echo what Mai said, and we welcome you to be involved in whatever way you feel like you have capacity. So that's why we wanted to provide options, because we know that all of us are very busy. We're managing a lot of things, including just being alive as a disabled person. So please don't just feel like you can come and join us however you can. We will also, Mai will follow up with an email to everyone, and with more information about our future meetings and about responding and letting us know which of these options feels right to you at this time. And you can always get more involved in the future if you feel open to it in the future. Does that sound right, Mike?
Absolutely, yes. This is Mai. Thanks, Angela. Yeah, and you know, we want you to, you know, if you do want to be a part of this work, we want you to do it in whatever way makes sense for you. And so even though I presented 3 options, that doesn't mean that those are the only options, right? Because any contribution is meaningful here, you know. So I'm gonna call on Claudia to look through the chat and just call it out in a minute here, but I do want to, just to give you a little bit more context, you know, when the monthly meetings are, or every other month, we're not sure yet, but when they are, when we do have a schedule set, like I said, I'll share that information out. I have a good list of folks to send that information out to already, and all of you who are with us tonight are on that list. Your emails are on that list, and you know, I'm thinking that our meetings are gonna do deeper dives into those 10 principles, because that's how we're really going to you know, sort of, we're gonna root our work in disability justice for Minnesota in those 10 principles. And so we're really gonna dig deep into those, you know, 1 or 2 at a time at each meeting. And then we're also, you know, we'll also throw in some fun activities here and there, and there may even be opportunities to bring in some speakers every now and then. And so I encourage you all to think about how you want to be a part of those meetings. And again, if you want to help plan the summit, that would be wonderful too. But again, any contribution is meaningful here. And so I appreciate any time and effort that you want to give us. So Claudia, do you want to go through that chat?
Absolutely. This is Claudia. I am getting the shivers. It's a good feeling. we're looking through these comments. We have amazing thinkers in
Stop
this
sharing,
house.
Natalie.
So my chat just moved. So there was ideas, I'm just gonna, in the interest of time, there was ideas about getting persons with disabilities as disabled mentors, so children, and so children can learn from folks who have disabilities and lead their own IEPs. And then we have someone who is on the, the board's moving around, the Disability Community Advisory Committee for Ramsey County, and is on board and would welcome input. People love the idea about being mentors to young disabled children. There's a shout out to Build Community by Nancy Yang, where disability justice isn't something that is foreign. Many people being supportive of that comment. I dream of a disability justice cultural center. And so there's just lots of support for some sort of disability cultural center. And there's just a lot of people who are interested. So thank you for your leadership on this, Mai. That's another thing that came in the chat. And we have lots of folks who are very, very interested in being a part of this effort.
Hi, this is Angela speaking. I see that Heidi is raising Heidi's hand, and I also want us to be mindful of the time and honor the time of our interpreters and captioners today. Heidi, do you have a comment you can offer in just a quick?
Yeah, is there more than 10 principles? I mean, it seems like we could break out and go so many different directions. Because I do this, I'm on the transportation for the governor, you know, for the Twin Cities, for the Met Council. So I'm always doing this work that you're talking about. And Maya knows because she's seen me. So is there more than 10 principles, or is it just 10 that someone came up with? Because it seems like it can go way further than this.
This is Angela speaking. That's such a great question, Heidi. There are just those 10 principles, but the way that the founders of that framework envisioned it was that they could go in many directions and be used in many different places for different reasons. So I really appreciated everyone talking about the places they do this work already. And I think our group might be able to think about how we can build this work together and then take it other places, like the councils we serve on, the places we do our daily work, and expand it throughout the state in that way. So there are only the 10, but we can get really deep into what those 10 principles mean and how we can expand them all through the state. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's more than just, you know, because it seems like you can go way further than. But I'll work with you guys because I like what you have to offer. Thank you.
We're so glad you're here, Heidi. And Mai, do you want to end us? We're right at time.
I do. Thank you all so much. You know, Angela kind of referenced this earlier. I know it's been a tough day for a lot of folks with the road decision. And, you know, I just want you all to know that, you know, as we build up this community together, we can support one another better also, right? When we're hit with some tough things and some trauma. So I'm here if you want to talk. But thank you all again for devoting a good chunk of your Friday evening to be a part of our conversation. We'll be in touch, and I wish you all good health and take care of yourselves. And we'll see you soon, hopefully. So thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Mai.
Thank you, interpreters, and thank you, captioners. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Nancy and Alan and interpreters. Captioners.
Thanks, Maya. Great job. Thanks, team.
Thanks, Jenna. Good to see you.
You too. Have a great weekend.
Yep, you too.
Hi, Dr. Kate. Good to see you. In your bright pink shirt. You always wear such great colors. You're muted, Kate.
The heat is getting to her, so it's, would you like to get that? Kate has been giving a very interesting talk to college students. She mentioned in the chat, Mike, on ways to think about disability differently. And she uses a lot of humor and talks about herself, partly because she causes, and she said I could talk to her about this because she can't type fast enough. She uses herself as an example because she causes cognitive dissonance for people, and they have to rearrange their thinking process because they look at Kate and they see a massive physical disability for someone who doesn't talk, who has a PhD. And so she goes through things like the medical model and lists all the things that the medical model says are the most important things about her, and says, and according to this, I'm pathetic. Talks about this, the social model, but ends up saying, it doesn't really talk about who I am. And then talks about something she's been working on, which is a value model that says, I have a PhD. I've got written chapters in a couple of books. I've been to Europe 8 times, soon to be 9. Of all the things she is as a person, and then talks about some of the common misperceptions people have about her and uses some intersectionality with that, because she talks about disability as a category of difference that gets you discriminated against. And basically, if you're female, a person of color, a lesbian, and disabled, you're totally screwed. Because everything is, again, you have 4 different ways people can discriminate against you. But then making distinctions for people. Can I tell them your funny story? Yeah, okay. Making distinctions because people tend to think of disability as an individual thing, rather than as a category of difference. And one of the things she talks about, because a student asked her about it, the student wanted to know if she minded if somebody she doesn't know comes up and asks her about her disability. And Kate's response is, well, I'd rather they ask me about my work or what kind of pizza I like, because that's interacting with me as a person. And then she takes it further and says, if you're asking about something from an individualistic perspective. If you think about it as a category of difference, then it's like if I go up to a man I don't know and say, how does having a penis impact your life? And everybody giggles, and you can see the light bulbs flashing up. Oh, inappropriate question. She talks about things like the offices of diversity talk about gender, sexual orientation, and color, people of color. And then at the very bottom, they say, if you need accommodations, call this number. And how people with disabilities are left out of so many things that other groups take for granted. Like, where are the mentoring groups for people with disabilities in colleges? Where are the special scholarships? Where are the special opportunities that you get because you're a person of color, that they just don't exist for people with disability? And really trying to help people to think about disability in a different way. And And she might be interested in doing some of that for your summit, of being able to talk to
Yeah.
about a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I love that. And Kate, I'm sorry, I don't know you.
She knows Angela.
Well, everybody knows Angela.
That's not true. There are lots of people that I'm meeting for the first time. I'm so excited for that. But Kate and I have known each other for a few years now.
Oops.
Yeah, I would love to explore that opportunity, Kate. I think that would be, maybe like a breakout or, a track of some kind. Again, like I mentioned during the meeting, we just haven't talked about it, I mean, it's something that we hope we can co-create with other folks. So, but,
Oh.
the earlier we can plan, who's gonna be involved and what conversations we're gonna have. Obviously the better that is for putting on a good summit. So we'll make sure. Would you mind emailing me your information? And then I'll just have that and I'll keep that as we go forward and we keep discussing how it's going to look like. But yeah, I love that. I think that would be definitely something we would consider. So.
Hey, Mai, this is Linda. And sorry, I had to miss a big chunk of the minute I was trying to listen, but I had forgotten all about I'm training a new PCH and I forgot about hold this thing until you said you were telling me. But one of the things I'm responding to you, is it Kate? Did I catch your name correctly? Yes, Kate. Okay. At the U of M, so I'm oldster. I've been around for a long time. Not as long as Jeff Bangsberg was here, but a long time. And at the U of M, and Angela probably knows this, but we formed the first disabled student cultural center in the whole United States. So where disability and culture were put together in seeing ourselves as a culture and not as somebody who needs to be fixed, and unfortunately, although Angela, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that kind of fell by the wayside for a while. I think it sort of picked back up, but the roots of that, and that was started in 1992. So quite a while ago. But we had a hard time attracting students because it seemed like when a lot of students got to college, they may need accommodations, right, and come to the Disability Resource Center, but they don't want to identify necessarily as having a disability because of the stigma associated with it. So, but back then we used to pack rooms with 120 people to have disabled performers. And, I would say at that point was probably the closest thing we ever came to with a disability justice movement in Minnesota. And it was more diverse than is typical. I want to say it's still predominantly white, but Minnesota is predominantly white. That's changing, but it's changing, ever changing. But I do know that we had a variety of disabilities also, some apparent, some non-apparent, and people, performance artists, and we brought in a group from Great Britain, and we did some pretty cutting edge work back then. But I hope we're working on a disability history project that we're going to hopefully track some of that stuff and find some. We even have some of the videos from that, so that would be pretty kind of cool to watch sometime. So because we had Paul Longmore, Judy Heumann, people that are disability rights leaders. But you're saying it, disability rights more than disability justice leaders, where I've seen Eli Clare, who's more of a disability justice leader, speak at the U. But just wanted to say that there has been some things going on in the long time past, and it's great to see this coming together again.
Linda, I love that you brought that up in this space. I think that you all and that work was really just revolutionary when it was happening. And what you named is exactly true, is that things have kind of moved and the U or Minnesota hasn't moved with it. So you know, that the cultural center still exists, but it's a student organization. It's not funded, it's not supported through the university. I think they get like 1 or 2 student workers, maybe get some fellowships, but it's not supported in the way that, like, we can look at Illinois and they have a cultural center that is staffed with people who have full-time jobs supporting students with developing their identities and their self-advocacy and understanding their history and bringing in speakers to like build that culture. And I think like, and that's across universities. Minnesota is very behind, and they often lead on like, oh, well, we were the first, but that we haven't caught up, you know. And then there's so many other things that the U just isn't caught up on. But I think what's really exciting for me with working with because I think Joanne, haven't met you yet, but I do work at the U, and so I think a lot about this in the context of the university. But I'm really excited for Mai's work because Mai's helping us think about it beyond the university. So it's not just the folks that have access or who have gotten to the university, which are important. I'm there for the students and the disabled faculty and staff, but what would it mean to think about this work not just in that institution? And that's what's really exciting to me, you know.
Well, and the other person that kind of co-founded or really was the founding student was a gay blind man. So intersectionality there, right? But we did have community members that were parts of the we'd have coffee houses, we call them. They were people from the community, not necessarily students at all. So because the community was starving for something like this, right? So it brought people in who are like dying to see this happen. And then it's really sad that it just kind of fell apart and we couldn't get students interested because they used to get a lot of money from student fees, and I don't know how much they get anymore. So but we would work on proposals together, but it got to just kind of go downhill, unfortunately, without the support.
Did you say you were working on a history project around Minnesota, disability in Minnesota?
Yeah, with Mai and Jeff, who was here tonight, and Margot. Yeah,
Okay.
or some of the old timers.
I would love to know more about that. I would really love to know more about that, Mike. So let's put that on our next conversation. I would love to know.
Yeah, I forgot to mention actually earlier tonight as an example of disability justice work, because I mean, it's serving several purposes, but one is like, when we talk about social justice work, so much of that is based off of what our ancestors and elders did previously, right? And generations that came before us. And I think there's just nothing like that for folks with disabilities, right? And we all know, the more popular folks like Justin Dart and, who I don't even know who else, Ed Roberts, right? I was just at the Ed Roberts campus and I can't even think of Ed Roberts.
Ed Roberts hit on Sue Krager, the director of disability services, at a conference at the U. Just
I love that.
I mean, like, those are the stories we're looking for, though, right? I mean, we're looking for not just where did we come from? Who were the folks who were most influential in getting us to where we are today, so that we can honor them and remember them as our elders, right? But like, what are some of the behind the scenes stuff that lots of folks don't even know about, right? And who are some of the folks who connected, like who from the East Coast came to Minnesota and connected with Minnesotan, disabled folks, and vice versa. And like, we talked a lot about like just the folks that are like some of the quote unquote regular disabled folks, that we don't hear about. But we always hear about those high profile people, right? And yes, they were instrumental in bringing us to where we're at today. But so it was really great. And yeah, I would love for you to be involved in that if you want to, Angela. Margot in particular wanted to have someone like an oral historian sort of come in also and have a role in sort of like organizing all of that information. And then we talked about like at some point bringing in the History Center to maybe share it, right, with the public.
I have
Yeah.
the work that I'm doing with Minnesota Transform. We have pretty strong connections with the Minnesota History Society Center, with Hennepin History Museum,
Right.
and with the Heritage Studies and Public History program here at the university. So this is absolutely something that I could bring back to, especially if there's that intersectional component, because part of what you're saying, Maya, is that the voices that we all know, which many people don't, right, know who Justin Dart or Ed Roberts are. Like, youth aren't taught that. But also Justin Dart and Ed Roberts were white men, and they were disabled white men, but they were still white men. And so their voices as the white men, particularly white men with physical disabilities, came to the top, which gives the perception that there weren't other folks around doing the work, but there were women, there were GLBTQ folks, there were tons of BIPOC people, there were all kinds of other folks doing that work, and their stories aren't heard as much. And the work that Minnesota Transform is doing is all around those stories, and how do we uplift those stories as a part of our history, and a part of the work that Minnesota needs to be thinking about. So I would really love to think about this as a part of the summit, and a part of what, I can't make promises, but I would love to learn more about the work you're doing and see if I have connections that can get more support for what you're doing.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'll follow up with you on that.
Yeah, Kate, I see you have your hand up, and then
The History Project.
Oh, okay.
could you say that again, Kate?
Part of that History Project.
Seeing as she's a historian.
She is, yes. Dr. Kate is a historian. This has been so great, and I really thank you so much for bringing me in on this work with you and giving me the opportunity to be in these spaces. I love being with other disabled people, even in the digital world. It's so good to see all of you, Linda and Kate and Joanne. And I need to run now. I have a kiddo who graduated 8th grade and is having a little 8th grade graduation celebration party with a couple friends in the backyard with s'mores, and it's a pride party and a graduating middle school party. And so I need to go be a part of that celebration with my kiddo.
Yeah.
Well,
I
thank
need
you,
to go have
Angela.
tacos.
Yeah, I appreciate.
Did you
I
say
appreciate so
tacos,
much all
Linda?
your effort.
I need to go have tacos.
Yes.
Oh, go have tacos. Go have tacos. Yeah, I gotta get off too. I'm moving tomorrow.
I was
so
gonna say, or buy
Yes,
some
I
more
better do
tacos
that.
with me.
Good luck, Mai. See you all later. Thank you,
All right,
Claudia.
thank you all. Thank
Good to see
Claudia.
you. Good to see you,
Thank
Joe.
you. Nice meeting
Right.
everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.
Nice to meet y'all too. Good to see you, Angela.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye, Mai.